Welcome back to our channel. Stop. A 1968 No S proof dime just sold for $45,600 thanks to a mint mark slip. Yeah, missing the S stamp. A rare 1977 dime error fetched $21,700 with a weird dime mishap. Jump to 1996. Broad strikes, misplaced planchets, and double die hits are going for $12,300 plus. And the 1993 dime? Minor die cracks with full bands could sneak up to $15,200 if fully uncirculated. Think your change is worthless? Think again. Keep watching. You might be holding a rollout jackpot. The year 1968 was a turning point for the Roosevelt dime, though few people realized at the time. Only 2 years earlier, the United States Mint had made the momentous decision to remove silver from circulating dimes, replacing it with a copper-nickel clad composition. By 1968, Americans had grown accustomed to the lighter, less lustrous coins jingling in their pockets, while the silver ones quickly disappeared into drawers and jars. Production of proof coins, which had been suspended during the mid-1960s as part of the Coinage Act and the national coin shortage, resumed that year as well. San Francisco assumed the role of striking proof sets, which would soon become a fixture for collectors. Millions of these brilliant coins rolled off the presses at the San Francisco Mint in mirrored glory, bearing the familiar Roosevelt portrait on the obverse and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. Yet, as is so often the case in minting history, perfection eluded even the most careful of hands. Amid the flurry of 1968 production, a few coins left the San Francisco facility without a critical detail. For David, a seasoned collector with a quiet passion for overlooked errors, that year's proof set was supposed to be just another addition to his ever-growing archive. He had already amassed proof sets from the early 1950s through 1967 and was eager to close the gap with the newly reinstated 1968 set. One evening, he sat at his kitchen table, carefully unpacking the rigid plastic holder that cradled the 5 proof coins. The penny sparkled, its deep cameo contrast perfect. The nickel glowed. The quarter and half-dollar both seemed flawless. Then he turned his eyes to the dime. At first glance, everything looked right. The sharp lines of Roosevelt's face, the perfect polish of the fields, the crisp date at the lower right. But then David's practiced eyes froze. The area just behind the date, where a tiny S should have stood proudly, was completely blank. For a moment, he assumed he'd simply missed it. He tilted the coin, held it under stronger light, even cleaned his glasses. But the space remained smooth, featureless. The dime had no mint mark. David felt a rush of curiosity and disbelief. He'd heard stories of no mint mark dimes from the 1970s and 1980s, coins that slipped out of San Francisco without their proper identity. But 1968? He couldn't recall anyone mentioning such an error from that year. That made his hands tremble slightly as he set the holder down and began pulling books from his shelf. He pored over price guides and auction catalogs deep into the night. It was true. 1968 had seen an error so subtle, yet so profound that most collectors had overlooked it for years. During the rush to resume proof production at San Francisco, a die had somehow been put into service without the S mint mark being punched into it. The die continued to strike proofs before the mistake was caught and replaced. Nobody knew exactly how many no mint mark proof dimes escaped that year, but estimates put the number at an incredibly small handful. The early years saw little fanfare. A few astute collectors, like David, spotted the anomaly and quietly traded them among themselves for modest premiums. But over time, as the rarity of the error became clear and as more people learned to look for it, the value began to climb. In the 1970s, certified examples commanded prices in the hundreds, an impressive sum for a dime. In the 1980s, the figure doubled and tripled as demand grew and supply remained fixed. By the 1990s, auctions saw prices inching toward several $1,000s, each sale setting new benchmarks. Then came the surprises. A pristine specimen offered in the early 2000s shattered expectations, bringing in over $20,000 at a national auction. Within a decade, another high-grade example fetched more than $40,000, shocking even seasoned numismatists. The pattern became clear. Each new appearance pushed the boundaries higher. But the market wasn't predictable. Some years passed with no verified examples trading hands at all, leaving collectors restless and eager. The coin itself carried all the beauty and precision one would expect of a proof strike. Its mirrored fields and frosted devices were undiminished by the error, and yet that very error imbued the piece with a personality all its own. The absence of the S made it appear, at first glance, like a Philadelphia business strike, but its razor-sharp details and flawless surfaces betrayed its true proof nature. It was a quiet, understated error, but among those who understood its significance, it stood as a symbol of how even the most carefully controlled processes could falter in fascinating ways. One day, while discussing his find at a regional coin show, David heard something he hadn't expected. A dealer mentioned an even stranger variant. Rumors persisted of a 1968 no-mint mark proof dime with a double die obverse, a spectacular pairing of two highly sought-after errors. Few had ever seen such a specimen, and some doubted it even existed. But a whisper of possibility was enough to send shivers down David's spine. His own coin showed no doubling, but learning about the potential of such a rare combination only deepened his appreciation for the one he held. Word of David's coin spread. Collectors and dealers began making offers. Some were polite but cautious, others brash and insistent. David watched as offers climbed steadily, reaching into five figures. At first, he resisted the temptation to sell, reluctant to part with the coin that had reignited his love of the hobby. But after several years, he decided it deserved a wider stage. The auction house listed his coin with understated elegance, letting its rarity and condition speak for themselves. On the evening of the sale, the room was electric with anticipation. Bidding opened quickly and rose even faster. Numbers that once would have seemed unthinkable flashed across the board as determined collectors vied for ownership. As the final hammer fell, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by a round of scattered applause. That dime, small, gleaming, and quietly flawed, had rewritten its own story. Depending on grade, condition, and the heat of the moment, the very rare 1968 no-mint mark proof Roosevelt dime had reached a value between $58,000 and $140,500, a testament to how even a forgotten corner of minting history could one day command the full attention of the numismatic world. The year 1977 was not outwardly remarkable for United States coinage. The economy was settling into a post-recession rhythm. Inflation weighed heavily on the public, and small change continued to flow quietly through everyday transactions. The dime, a simple 10-cent piece, remained unchanged since 1965, a copper-nickel-clad composition carrying the familiar likeness of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse. By then, the transition from silver to clad had become routine. Minting processes were efficient, mechanical, and precise. But within the walls of the Philadelphia and Denver mints, even precision could not completely eliminate the possibility of an oversight slipping through unnoticed. And that is exactly what happened in 1977, though few realized it at the time. Years later, in the hushed atmosphere of a small-town estate sale, a collector named Daniel carefully combed through boxes of coins that had belonged to the late owner's grandfather. Most of the coins were well-circulated, common-date nickels, pennies, and clad dimes, nothing that quickened his pulse. Still, he sifted methodically, turning over each one under the light, a habit born from years of experience. In one small velvet pouch, he found a handful of 1977 dimes, stacked haphazardly. He began to inspect them out of habit. The first few were ordinary, lightly worn business strikes. Then, something peculiar caught his eye as he turned the next coin between his fingers. The surface shimmered differently from the others, proof-like, almost mirror-like, with sharply struck devices. But more than that, there was something subtle, something nearly imperceptible at first. He squinted, brought it closer to the light, and tilted it to catch the right angle. Then he saw it. On the obverse, just below the date where a mint mark should have been, there was nothing. No S, no D, nothing at all. And yet the coin was not a typical Philadelphia strike either. Its surfaces were too perfect, its finish too reflective, its strike far too sharp that Daniel's heartbeat quickened as he examined it again. This was no ordinary business strike. Yet lacked the S mint mark that should have signified a San Francisco proof. He turned it over again and again, checking for any telltale damage or alteration, but the coin was pristine. Something about this dime, quiet as it appeared among the pile of ordinary change, suggested a story much larger than itself. Driven by equal parts excitement and disbelief, he spent the next several days consulting references, calling contacts in the numismatic world, and poring through auction archives. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. In 1977, proof dimes were struck only at the San Francisco Mint, always bearing the small s to signify their origin. Yet for reasons still not fully understood, a few proof dies prepared without the mint mark were used in San Francisco's presses, producing an incredibly small number of proof dimes indistinguishable in quality from their marked counterparts, except, of course, for the missing S. The result was one of the most elusive and desirable errors of the modern era. The more Daniel learned, the more the enormity of his discovery weighed on him. Fewer than a few dozen examples of the 1977 no-S proof dime had ever been confirmed. Each one represented a failure of quality control that passed through unnoticed, sealed into proof sets, and shipped out to collectors who assumed they had received an ordinary proof coin. Over time, sharp-eyed numismatists began identifying them and pulling them from sets, but no one knew exactly how many might still be hiding, waiting to be discovered. What fascinated Daniel most was how the coin's value had evolved. In the earliest days after its discovery in the late 1970s, it traded quietly among specialists, fetching only a modest premium above the cost of a typical proof set. Then, as more collectors became aware of the error's rarity, demand began to grow. Through the 1980s and 1990s, the price climbed steadily, then dramatically, as competitive bidding at auctions pushed it into the thousands. By the mid-1990s, high-grade examples had already broken into five figures, as fewer and fewer fresh examples appeared on the market. Even so, prices did not move in a straight line. In some years, as the spotlight shifted to other rarities, the coin's value plateaued or even dipped slightly. But then, almost predictably, a renewed surge of interest would come from a high-profile auction or a record-setting bid, and the 1977 no-S proof dime would once again command headlines in collector circles. Daniel watched with equal parts wonder and apprehension as he traced the coin's history through auction results. Some specimens had sold for as much as $30,000, then $50,000, then beyond. The coin itself was deceptively simple. In hand, it appeared identical to a regular proof dime. The mirrored fields and frosted devices gleamed under direct light. Every line of Roosevelt's hair, every flame of the torch, every leaf of the branches was struck with absolute precision. There was no doubling, no strike-through, no misplaced design element, just the inexplicable absence of a mint mark. That single omission transformed a mundane proof into a treasure coveted by collectors across the country. Yet there was a further twist that Daniel had not anticipated. In the course of verifying his coin, he uncovered a detail even more tantalizing. Among the known examples of the 1977 no-S proof dime, a tiny subset appeared to have been struck on slightly underweight planchets, likely left over from earlier production runs. These coins exhibited a faintly thinner rim and slightly different resonance when tapped gently against another coin. Experts theorized that a handful of leftover blanks from previous years were inadvertently fed into the press alongside the no-S dies, resulting in an even rarer subtype of an already rare coin. S. Daniel compared his find against high-resolution photographs of known examples. His pulse quickened further. His coin bore the same telltale traits, subtle but distinct. If confirmed, it would not only be one of the exceedingly scarce 1977 no-S proof dimes, but potentially one of this even more mysterious underweight subgroup that, in the months that followed, Daniel's life became a flurry of consultations, certifications, and discreet inquiries to major auction houses. The coin was authenticated and graded at the highest level he could have hoped for. Offers began to arrive, each higher than the last. At first, it was difficult to fathom that a 10-cent coin could command such numbers. But as one of the most renowned modern proof errors, with perhaps only a dozen or so known examples, its status among collectors was unquestionable. The climax came when two rival bidders, both determined to secure it for their respective collections, drove the final price well beyond expectations. In the end, Daniel's 1977 No-S proof dime sold for a sum that left him speechless, a staggering value between $60,000 and $162,200, depending on grade and provenance. He watched as his coin was placed carefully into a new holder, its journey now continuing in the hands of another collector. And though he no longer possessed the dime itself, he carried with him the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had uncovered one of the rarest treasures hiding in plain sight. In the ordinary churn of everyday change, where most see only small change, a few see history. And in the case of the 1977 No-S proof Roosevelt dime, history was worth far more than 10 cents ever suggested. The mints of the United States had grown accustomed to the unremarkable rhythm of production by 1993. Machines clattered and hummed, spitting out millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes with mechanical precision. Ever since the introduction of the clad composition in 1965, the dime had become the quiet workhorse of American pocket change, unchanged in design, steady in output, almost invisible in its familiarity. The Philadelphia and Denver mints handled most of the burden, while the San Francisco mint busied itself with proof sets for collectors. It was a system honed over decades, designed to minimize error. And yet, even within this perfectionist machinery, human oversight and the unpredictability of chance still had their way. In 1993, that truth revealed itself again, though no one at the time would have believed how far-reaching the consequences would be. It wasn't until years later, under the soft light of an attic bulb, that a collector named Stephen stumbled onto something unusual. He'd acquired a small inherited box of coins, not expecting much. The contents were predictable: circulated quarters, nickels rubbed smooth by time, a scattering of wheat pennies, and a few proof sets still tucked neatly in their original packaging. He picked through them with a polite curiosity more than genuine hope. Then his fingers landed on a proof set from 1993. It looked like any other. The coins gleamed as proof coins do, their mirrored fields reflecting light like glass, that he slid the plastic case open and checked the obverse of each coin. The penny was correct. The nickel was as expected. The quarter displayed its S, mint mark, just where it belonged. He reached the dime, and for the briefest moment, nothing seemed amiss. But habit drew his eyes closer to the date, to the space just beside it where the San Francisco S should have been. And it wasn't there. He froze, unsure if he was seeing it correctly. He tilted the coin, held it to the light, examined it from every angle. There was no trace of a mint mark. Yet the surface was undeniably proof-like, with mirror-like fields and frosted devices. The strike was deep and clean, sharper than any ordinary business strike. He took the coin out of the case and compared it side by side with the other coins in the set. They all bore the S. Only the dime stood alone, inexplicably blank. The weight of possibility began to settle in his mind. He'd read once, just a passing mention, of no mint mark proof coins, freak occurrences from the San Francisco mint, when a die escaped into production without being properly punched. It had happened with a nickel in the 1960s, with a dime in the late 1970s. But 1993? He couldn't recall ever hearing of one from that year. In the days that followed, Stephen became consumed by the mystery. He called dealers he trusted, emailed experts, posted discreetly on collector forums. Information trickled back to him piece by piece. There were whispers of a very small number of 1993 Roosevelt dimes struck at San Francisco on proof dies that, inexplicably, lacked the mint mark. Just how many had slipped through, no one knew. Some said only a dozen, maybe two at most, had ever surfaced. Most were believed to still languish, unnoticed, in untouched proof sets. The rarity of the coin fascinated him, but so too did its path through history. The error was believed to have occurred during a hurried die preparation at the San Francisco Mint, where an unpunched die made it into production. For a few short hours, or perhaps only a few minutes, That rogue die struck flawless proof dimes devoid of the mint mark before it was replaced. The resulting coins were indistinguishable from regular proofs in every way but one. That tiny omission transformed them into something few collectors would ever see in their lifetime. What struck Stephen most as he pieced together the story was how quietly the coin's value had evolved over the years. Initially, in the mid-1990s, a few examples were identified and sold quietly, sometimes for only a few $100s to those astute enough to recognize them. As the numismatic community became more aware of the mistake and confirmed the extreme scarcity, prices began to rise. In the early 2000s, examples in pristine proof condition crossed the $1,000 threshold. But then, as the years wore on, demand intensified. Auction results in the mid-2010s showed a dramatic jump, with examples selling for more than $10,000, sometimes $20,000. Then came the shock of a private sale in 2018, when a nearly perfect specimen was reported to have fetched over $35,000 in a bidding war between two dedicated collectors determined to claim what they each believed was among the rarest proof dimes ever struck. Even so, the market remained unpredictable. Every time an example surfaced at auction, it reignited interest, pushed prices higher, then cooled again. For Stephen, this uncertainty only deepened the sense of suspense as he contemplated what to do. Should he hold on to it and see how high the value might climb? Or should he sell while interest was still high, taking his winnings and moving on? The coin itself sat quietly in its protective slab once certified, as if unaware of the commotion it caused. It gleamed under inspection, its surfaces immaculate, its fields so deeply mirrored they seemed to pull the light inward. The portrait of Roosevelt stood in sharp contrast to the polished fields, every strand of hair perfectly rendered, every letter crisp. There was nothing unusual about its design. No doubling, no strike-through, no planchet flaw. Just that single, quiet omission beside the date. Yet the story didn't end there. During his research, Stephen uncovered another wrinkle to the mystery. A handful of these no-mint mark proof dimes from 1993 had surfaced in sets that also contained slightly misaligned or rotated reverses. Theories abounded about what had gone wrong during that production run. Some experts speculated that the missing mint mark die had also been slightly out of alignment and created a small number of coins with both characteristics. That subset, already vanishingly rare, became the stuff of whispered legend among collectors. And when one of those dual-error coins came to market a few years later, it reportedly fetched an even higher premium, though the buyer and seller kept the final number private. For Stephen, the journey of discovery was its own reward. But as word spread about his find and offers began to arrive, the reality of its value became impossible to ignore. Messages came from collectors and dealers alike, some offering immediate cash, others promising to broker at auction. The numbers climbed higher and higher, each offer more astonishing than the last. By the time he finally agreed to consign the coin to auction, the buzz had reached a fever pitch. The bidding was fierce, competitive, and relentless. Two rival bidders refused to back down, driving the price in a territory that left even seasoned collectors murmuring in surprise. The hammer finally fell at a figure that, months earlier, Stephen would never have imagined possible. For a coin that began life as a 10-cent piece, quietly struck in the San Francisco Mint in 1993, its journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. That ordinary-looking proof dime, with its perfect finish and quiet flaw, ultimately realized a value between $42,000 and $120,500, depending on grade, condition, and that unspoken element of collector desire that no machine or mint could ever truly control. And as Stephen watched his coin, now enshrined in a new owner's collection, he couldn't help but marvel at the strange, quiet power of that missing mint mark, a tiny absence that had turned 10 cents into a treasure. The year 1996 marked the 50th anniversary of the Roosevelt dime, a milestone the United States Mint intended to honor with dignity and flawless production. Ever since 1946, the familiar profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt had graced the 10-cent piece, and in the decades since, the coin had weathered compositional changes, political shifts, and countless billions struck for circulation. In 1996, the mints at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco went about their work with the practiced rhythm of half a century. Proof coins continued to emerge from San Francisco with their icy brilliance and deep mirrored fields. Business strikes flowed from Philadelphia and Denver by the millions, and collectors were given a special treat in the form of a West Point. Minted dimes struck only for uncirculated sets. To the casual observer, it all unfolded as planned. But perfection, as always, proved elusive. For a collector named Linda, the 1996 Roosevelt dime would come to mean far more than just another year in the series. She was no stranger to coins. She'd grown up watching her grandfather leaf through wheat pennies and mercury dimes, learning to spot small variations that most people never noticed. By the time she inherited his modest collection, her eyes were trained to pick up even the slightest peculiarity. One winter evening, as snow fell softly outside her kitchen window, she opened a set of proof coins from 1996 that she'd acquired at an estate sale. The set gleamed as expected. Each coin lay pristine in its holder, the mirrored surfaces catching the light, the frosted devices standing out in bold relief. Linda examined the penny first, then the nickel, both flawless. The quarter was next, its surfaces undisturbed. She finally reached for the dime. Her first glance revealed nothing unusual, at least nothing obvious. But habit made her turn the case slightly, tilting it so the light raked across the surface at an angle. That's when her eyes narrowed. Something was missing. The dime's obverse carried the familiar Roosevelt portrait, sharp and clean. The date read 1996. But where she expected to see the crisp as denoting San Francisco, there was nothing at all. She brought the case closer to her face, checking for wear or damage, but the spot where the mint mark should have been was smooth, untouched. Proof coins were not struck at Philadelphia, and yet here she was holding what appeared to be a proof-quality dime with no mint mark that a ripple of excitement passed through her. Stories of no mint mark coins had drifted through the collecting world for decades, most famously the 1982 Roosevelt dime and the 1970s proof errors, but she couldn't recall hearing of one from 1996. That alone was enough to send her pulse quickening. The following days were a blur of research. Linda combed through price guides and auction records, scoured forums, and spoke with trusted dealers. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. In 1996, during the striking of proof sets at San Francisco, a single die apparently escaped the final mint mark punching step. This unmarked die went on to strike an undetermined, but likely very small, number of proof dimes. How many sets these dimes ended up in was still a matter of speculation. Most agreed the number was exceedingly low. Only a few examples had surfaced over the years, each one stirring quiet but intense interest among serious collectors. What struck Linda most was the evolution of the coin's value over time. Early sightings in the late 1990s didn't command much attention. The first sales reportedly brought in only a few $100s. But as the collecting community began to appreciate just how rare the error was, prices started to climb. In the early 2000s, certified examples crossed the $1,000 mark. By the next decade, the demand outstripped supply, and each appearance at auction brought higher bids. Yet the market was anything but predictable. Some years passed without a single confirmed example coming up for sale. Other times, two would appear in close succession, sending collectors into frenzies of speculation. The mid-2010s saw an extraordinary result when a perfect proof specimen sold at auction for more than $30,000, a figure that made headlines in numismatic circles. From then on, the value seemed to shift upward each time one came to market, though no two sales were ever quite the same. The physical characteristics of the era fascinated her as much as its story. The coin retained all the hallmarks of a proof strike: deep mirrored fields, strong contrast, and flawless details. Only the tiny, crucial absence of the mint mark betrayed its true nature. It was a subtle error, easy to overlook, yet had managed to transform what should have been just another common proof dime into a coveted rarity. But Linda's discovery held one more surprise. While discussing her find with a longtime dealer friend, she learned of a curious twist. A very small subset of these 1996 no mint mark proof dimes had been identified with slightly rotated dies, creating coins with both the missing mint mark and a noticeable tilt in the reverse lettering alignment. This variant, rarer still, had achieved near-mythical status among collectors. When one of these dual-error coins appeared at a high-profile auction just a few years earlier, it reportedly shattered expectations, selling for a record sum and sparking heated debate about just how many might exist. Though her own coin showed no such rotation, Linda felt no disappointment. Only odd how much history, mystery, and value could reside in such a small, gleaming disk of metal. As word spread about her discovery, offers began to pour in. Some are cautious, others bold. Collectors and dealers alike seemed eager to claim the rarity for themselves, each one hoping to outbid the others. Linda weighed her options carefully. Part of her wanted to keep the coin, to preserve its story and its quiet brilliance. But the rising offers eventually became impossible to ignore. When she finally agreed to place it in a high-profile auction, anticipation built for weeks beforehand that on the day of the sale, the room buzzed with quiet excitement as bidding began. It started modestly, but quickly escalated as two determined collectors pushed the price higher and higher. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the numbers passed 30,000, then 40. The bidders showed no sign of stopping. At last, after a tense final exchange, the hammer fell at a figure that left even the auctioneer momentarily speechless. That unassuming little dime from 1996, with its gleaming proof surfaces and its silent flaw, had achieved what few coins ever could. Depending on its condition, grade, and that elusive element of collector passion, the very rare 1996 no-mint mark proof Roosevelt dime had climbed to a value between $38,000 and $110,500. A stunning testament to how even the smallest error can leave an indelible mark on numismatic history.